So there's not a textbook for the class, though there are books you can reference, and have a lot of online resources and materials, and you guys already saw those. But I think the first place is just to start out with, hopefully where we'll get by the end of the semester. So we were able to realize this by the end of last semester, and just kind of show you a working application. And so over 16 weeks or so, try to acquire the skills to be able to do something like this. And so I have the code right here, all of the code for this application. So if you have experience and you're more advanced and you want to jump right in and just start looking at this code and figuring it out, cool. Okay? So let's take a look at that. I hope I didn't just delete something. No, I'm searching for X. Cool. All right. And
you don't have internet.
I don't have internet. Do they have Ethernet?
I didn't look.
Pause the video. All right, so let's take a look at that. Google Developer Console. There's a place called Google Developer Console, and this is where you go if you want to develop stuff on Google. And we'll be using App Engine, and we'll talk about that. But here's one project ID. So I put in that project ID, and I go to appspot.com, and it'll serve this site. This is what we were hoping to build by the end of the semester, right? Get the skills to do this. And so it's a Twitter clone, and I don't know, had a little fun with it. 7 deadly sins, 1 convenient location. You can find everything there, right? Lust, greed, envy, hatred, whatever, right? Probably on Twitter. Slothfulness. And so, I just put this up just to make sure it's running. Yeah, slothfulness, right? Just like totally wasting Twitter time all day. And, little rollover effect, and then go to login. And I could log in, or I could create an account. And so when I go to create an account, enter an email, so test 42, and enter a name. And as I enter a name, if, hey, wow, that's not hiding. All right, if that name's taken, it will, that's a little bit of an error. I should fix that right there so that it's not showing. But it'll show me that name is taken. And if that name's not taken, so that's a little bit of Ajax. All right, name's taken. That's kind of bad. What was the attribute for CSS attribute autocomplete? Is it autocomplete off? That's it. Turn off autocomplete CSS tricks. It's autocomplete off? Autocomplete off. There we go. Cool. So let's adjust that code, and that would be in
The template.
templates, and in my sign up. And so autocomplete off, that field is it's going to be my username, enter Twitter name, so I could just look for that.
Line 8 there. Line 8 there.
Autocomplete off. Huh, so I'm not sure why that's not.
Did it not get uploaded?
No, this is the right one. This file, you mean, did it not get uploaded?
Yeah.
I don't know. Somewhere it's getting overridden. That's web programming. So anyhow. And then, create one, so I could create a new name. Somebody give me a name.
Cowbob.
Cowbob. And we'll use the same password for Cowbob. Sure. But now Cowbob can tweet. And his tweets show up. Cowbob. And I think we also put it in here that we could go to user, Cowbob. Or was it user? There we go. So there's here's Cowbob or Cowboy. So we're doing that. You could follow if you were right, you're Cowbob, so you could follow Cowboy. It's Clovis, Fresno, so cowboy stuff. Yeah.
I just realized why the username is saving is because whenever you get that message that says to save password and stuff, the it's actually Google Chrome that's saving it, not the
Oh, is that why I'm getting the drop down? Because I chose to save that?
right.
That sucks.
Yeah, so it's Chrome. It's not the.
And if I go show you, I'll probably show all my other saved username passwords. All right. So that's that's the code for that. So let's take a look at starting out. And I figured we'd just start out right with the web stuff, and then we can kind of look at it and see what's going on. And that will help us learn the language. So in the last 2 times I've taught this class, we spent a couple of weeks on the fundamentals of the language. And if we need to do that, we could always step back. But you have such a great resource with those videos that I'm just going to kind of leave it up to you to plow through those videos. I mean, 22 hours of videos, that's a good 3 days. You know, a long weekend you could watch, or over a week, right? Just watch 2 to 3 hours, 3 hours a day for a week, and you'll have a really good understanding of the language. So the first place would just be like with form letters. So here's a form letter. And this is like the basics of web programming. Start out with some sort of a template, and then we're going to interject data. So I could have this template, and then I could run it against a data source, and for each entry in the database, data storage, whatever it is, I could pull out the first name, and I could merge that with the form letter. Right? Makes sense. So this is how you could do junk mail and spam. That's what you guys came here to learn, right? So how would we do that with Go? So here's a little Go program. Package main, package declarations always up at the top, different packages. And then import statements, so we're importing different packages, and packages are pre-written code that we might want to use. So in the standard library, there's a FUMT package, and that's the way you say it in Go. I'm not sure if that's how you say it in other languages, but in Go, I have been told by Bill Kennedy, the author of Go in Action, that you say FUMT, Todd, FUMT, not format, FUMT. Okay, it's FUMT. All right? And so now I have access to all of the different, functions that are visible outside that package. So making things visible or not visible outside a package in Go is done with capitalization. And we don't say public-private like you might in Java, where you create some other code you want to use or make it public-private. We don't say that because public-private comes with a lot of baggage from other languages. So we say visible, not visible outside the package, or exported, not exported outside the package. So here, print line, and Daniel, jump in anytime I am not precise with my terminology. And Alan and Shin. So, hey, and Aaron. Awesome. So the print line is just, from the FUMT package. And I could see that here if I hold down Command in WebStorm on a Mac, right? I guess maybe be Control. I move my mouse. I'm getting a finger. My computer's giving me the finger. Luckily, it's the index finger, not the middle finger. Though, I saw a little prank you could download way back in the day where it changed the fingers. You could run that on somebody's computer and then, wait to see if they notice. So FUMT, I could click on print line. It takes me straight to the standard library. The standard library. And so here in the standard library, I see the code that the people who created Go wrote, right? It's an open source project. So, but a lot of this was, vast majority of it was written by engineers at Google. And so this is, if you want to see an example of how to write good code, the standard library is an excellent resource just to take a look at how did they write it. And so that's one of the places you can look to learn. And then also it has all the comments right up top. And so you could read this right here. And these are going to be the same comments that you will find over at godoc.org. So if I go to godoc.org, I could search up here for FUMT. And there's the FUMT package. Notice it's just FMT. There's nothing else here, right? There's a few other FUMT results down below. So at godoc.org, you have documentation for the standard library and third-party packages. Godoc.org, documentation for the standard library. That's FUMT from the standard library and third-party packages. Anybody could write code for Go, share packages, right? Put them up there. If we wanted a universally unique ID, right, we could do that. And okay, here's some pre-written code. We could go look at how other people created a UUID in Go, and you know, grab that code and use it. But so this is godoc.org. People might get confused because you could go to golang.org. This is a confusion point. And you could go to documents. And you could go down to package documentation. Okay? Command documentation for the Go command. That's also interesting. Frequently asked questions is really cool. Just a little bit of a tangent. You know, why create this language? Why did Google do it? Why have a new language? This stuff right here is awesome. You want to learn about, like, ooh, this language, so awesome. That's where you go. Check that out. But here's the package documentation. And in package documentation, just do a Command F to search the entire page, right? So inside Chrome, I'm searching all the text on this web page. There's funct. Well, here's funct, and here's funct. What's the difference between funct at Godoc and funct at golang.org? Nothing. Exact same documentation, just two different places. Golang.org, the official website of the Go programming language, and it's only going to have documentation for the standard library. No third-party documentation here. This, some dude created it, right, godoc.org, and he has all the documentation for the standard library there, and he has documentation for third-party packages. What's up?
And don't forget, inside your terminal, you also have godoc as a command.
Yeah, so if you want inside your terminal, you could also look up packages. You could say, so is that one of the Go commands?
Yep.
Godoc, okay? So I just hit Go in my terminal, and because I have the Go SDK running on my machine, it understands, you know, Go is a command. It's looking down my environment path variables, and then, okay, this is what I do when somebody enters Go. And let me just take a moment and talk about environment path variables. So an environment or path variable, how many people have a totally, okay, this is a game I like to play in my classes. It's called The Truth Will Save You, okay? All right, so if you could not explain path or environment variables, raise your hand and I won't call on you. The truth will save you. All right, cool. So in your computer, you have environment variables. Why? All right, so who didn't have their hand raised that wants to take a crack at explaining? How do you understand environment variables?
Do you want the environment variables or the path variables?
I thought they were the same thing. Is there a difference? Ah! Monty Python. What's the difference between environment variables and path variables? This is awesome. I'm learning.
Variable is used for commands.
Ah.
Go is stored under a path variable, so when you type that command, it will look in your path and say, hey, does anything here have the command of go? An environment variable, on the other hand, can be referenced by other things. Go root, for example, up there. Go will ask for go root and say, or go path. Go will ask for go path and say, hey, I'm going to install something. I need go path. If you can have go path empty, blank, just not there, and still run Go just fine as long as it exists on the path. But you cannot install things with Go until you have go path.
Cool. So these are all environment variables. And one of the environment variables is go root, one of the environment variables is go path, and then path is one of the environment variables. Correct? And then path is for when we enter commands at the terminal.
The terminal
at the command line.
Into path.
The terminal knows to look in the path. So what's that mean? If I enter go, my computer is going to come here, and it's going to go down this path, users TM002 Google Cloud SDK bin, and it's going to go and knock on the door of the code that lives there. Hello, do you know how to run a go command? I've been given a go command. I don't know what to do with it. And Google Cloud SDK is going to be like, you know, that sounds like something I know because it starts out GO, but I'm Google Cloud SDK. I can't help you. Keep looking. Okay, so the go command, the computer then says user local seller package config 29 bin. Anybody here know how to run a go command? Nope, sorry, can't help you. Right? And it goes down each of these paths until it finally gets to user local go bin. Cool, I know how to run a go command. Cool, let's run it. All right, here it is. Do something with it. Right? Did I describe that right? So that's path variable, environment variable. All right, so in Go, you could enter Go. And then here are the different commands that you could do. There's commands, and there's additional help topics. And at golang.org, you have command documentation, right? So you could go and see the same deal right here that we just brought up in the terminal. So there's the Go command, right? Same deal. Commands, and what's this one down here? Help topics. Yeah, jump in. So Alan was just like, hey, check it out, there's Go doc. And so I could say, okay, well, how do I use Go doc? Go command arguments, Go help command, Go help doc. And so here it will give me examples of how to use, the Go doc command. And so I could read about this here, and I'm sure I could probably find it over here somewhere. It's a pretty big page, probably in there. So Go doc funct. And I'm going to do Command K on my keyboard to clear the screen out before I run that. And then it brought in all this. Package funct implements formatted I/O with functions analogous to C's. And here we have package funct implements formatted I/O with functions analogous to C's. And here we have thank you. Package funct implements format I/O with functions analogous to C's. Okay, so just many places, same thing. All right.
The command line one does not require an internet connection, which, but then it's command line, which can be a bit of a pain to wrestle with.
And reading documentation, always good to sort of read this header information right at the top. And then the index is a great place to go. And so I'm looking for print line, right? Is that what we use? Print line. And so here's print line. And all this is described in that training online, the Go training, how to read all the documentation and everything. But I'm here, so I'll say a little bit about it. So I could click there and print line. Print line formats using default formats. Print line formats using default formats, right? So the documentation is built right off of the comments in the standard library. So we have a name, a variable, and this is, I just want to say it's the shorthand technique for declaring, assigning, initializing a variable. Okay? So declaring a variable is like var y int. I've declared there's a variable. The identifier is y. It is of type int. That's declaration. And then assignment, there's assignment. And then altogether, I've initialized y, the variable y. Did I use that right? Is that the right way to describe it? I don't know. Just talking about the differences between declare, assign, and initialize. So here I'm using a shorthand technique. How can we learn? What is that actually called? I just call it the shorthand technique. Is that the right word?
I think so. It's shorthand for that.
Shorthand declaration operator, I think. I could go to Golang spec. Okay? So I just typed in Golang spec. When you Google Golang, because if you just type in Go spec, right, it'll know because it's me. But if I was not having my history tracked, right, hey.
It knows Go at least.
Knows
but then
Go.
look at all the other.
Yeah, so you get more specific results. Golang spec. So I could get to it that way. Notice it's at the golang.org website. So I could also get to it just at golang.org.
It's in the documents.
And go to documents, and then language specification, language specification. So that's like the definitive source, the horse's mouth for getting accurate information. But it's also a little bit like Japanese haiku. Doesn't necessarily make sense the first time you read it, but if you meditate upon it, adopt it in your life as a cone, after a couple of weeks of repeating the phrase and re-looking at the phrase, suddenly meaning becomes clear. Language spec. There's also Effective Go, which is another really good resource for horse's mouth, definitive about this language. How do I use it? All right. So Golang spec. So here at the Golang spec, I am interested in the shorthand operator. So lexical elements. Lexical are things related to a language. Lexical define. Right? Lexicon of or relating to words or vocabulary of a language. So these are the lexical elements, the elements related to this language. And I can look through here, identifiers, keywords, operators, and there's the shorthand declaration operator. I think that's what it's called. If I just search this page for it, I can see all the places where it's used. And lo and behold, the second one I got was totally lucky. In a short variable declaration, such as I : = 0. Okay? So it's just a way that you could really quickly declare and assign a variable, initialize a variable. And that's one of the nice things about Go. They wanted to find that happy land between a code, programming language that writes really easily, and also, but at the same time is powerful. So it writes like a scripting language. It doesn't have a lot of bull crap or garbage or stutter, right? Or public static void main, PSVM over and over, and I don't know. It seemed like I haven't done a lot of Java, but it seemed like there's always like you're saying the same things over and over and over. So you want to, yeah.
So like when you're using that short variable declaration, you don't have to declare like if it's like a boolean or if it's
No, yeah.
Well, in Go in general, if you're doing a full-on initialization, it can figure out what type the variable is based off of the right-hand side. So actually, that longhand form that he wrote when he added the equal sign with the number, he could have gotten rid of the int.
I already got rid of it. Could have done that.
It's like, oh, there's an int on the right-hand side. That's an int. This is obviously an integer type. Let's just take the type of the variable's integer. Don't make the user repeat themselves. If you're like creating an instance of the Go's equivalent of a class, you're already saying the name of it in order to create it. Why do you have to say it for the type too? It can figure it out. So that's called stuttering, and a lot of other languages have it.
I love your accuracy. You could also do multiple, I don't know, declarations and assignments, initializations. You could do multiple initializations. So in this code right here, I is 0 and j is 10. And when you see that happen, like with a loop, that could look a little confusing because you have your in a loop. Let's just look at the exact words. You have your initializer, your check, and then your post. And so I think it might be an effective Go. Loop.
4.
Four.
Under
It's on the
control,
left.
control structures.
Okay, so your init, your condition, and your post, right? So if you have multiple variables in each of those, that could look a little bit funny. That can throw people off.
So in that multiple assignment, it can have different types for each of those things too. They don't have to be the same type. So you can have one of them be an integer and one of them be a string if you want, or something else. Yeah.
Are you restricted to just having like a maximum number of things you can initialize being just 2, or do you have like?
Nope, you can put as many as you want, although it gets out of as much as you can as a programmer can kind of see and understand. Yeah.
But the thing, one of the one of the cultural things about Go, and one of the recommendations of Go, and to write idiomatic Go. So you'll hear the phrase idiomatic. And idioms are patterns of speech. So an idiom, like, the example I often use is if I was to say, hey, the waves are big, I'm going to get my gun. How many people understand me? Nobody? You're like, why are you going to get a gun if the waves are big? But in surfing, when you have big waves, you call your big surfboard for surfing big waves, you call it your gun. Because way back in the 50s, Greg Knoll, one of the original big wave pioneers, said you're going to go hunt big game, you need a big gun. Or you're going to go hunt big elephants, you need a big gun. That's what somebody asked him, why is your board so big? Right? So ever since then, people have called them guns. And so anyhow, that's an idiom to the surf culture. you are now in the programming culture, but even more locally, a subculture of the programming culture is the Go programming language culture, right? And so some of the idioms we use in talking about the language, there's a language for talking about the language. One of the idioms is idiom or idiomatic, right? So when you write idiomatic code, you're writing code which is good Go code. And one of the ways you want to write Go code is choose clear over clever and clear over concise. So if it takes you another 18 lines to make it more readable, write those 18 lines. If you're going to declare, on 10 lines instead of 1 and it's more clear, great. So choose clarity over clever. So here are all the types. We're at the language spec still. And this throws people off too, the numeric types. There's a lot of numeric types in there. When I first saw this, I was like, oh dear Lord. I got to figure out when to use each of these. Generally speaking, you use an int if you need an int. Or you use a float 64 if you need a float. Okay? And then a couple other ones which are funny. There's a few that are in here which are, make sure I use the right word. I want to say alias, but oh yeah, there we go. Byte is an alias for a uint8. Rune is an alias for a uint32. This is basically a character. It's int32 because ASCII or UTF-8 is a 4-byte coding scheme. So 4 bytes is 32 bits. But all this is in that training. Okay. So for those of you who weren't here. For those of you who weren't here on whatever other day that was, the Udemy Todd McLeod, thanks. And then here, you could go to Go. And so all the stuff we're talking about is covered there. Ooh, it's only $24 today. I don't even have a coupon code. That's why I like this price. I just put a crazy high price for perceived value. That's a marketing deal, right? For whatever reason, this has an impact upon us. But if you type in the coupon code, let's go, you get it for 9. And if you can't afford 9, send me an email. I'll let you in for free. So that's all covered there. All right, let's get back to that. We've got a few minutes left. Just kind of giving a tour. So here are questions. No. I have 2 variables. Name, it's a string, and I do a fumped print line, and I'm printing. And you could create another string when you print with either backticks. And so that string right here goes from there to there, backticks. Or you could do it with double quotes. Backticks will give you a raw string literal, which means that it's literally just like that raw string right there. Raw string literal.
It disables the / escape character, so you are not actually able to put in \n. But it also means you can go to a next line if you want. When he presses enter there, it's actually the actual new line character in the string. Whereas the double quote string, it has to be all in one line.
Yeah, and we could also include double quotes inside the backticks, right? It doesn't kill the string. So there's a string, and here's another string.
You're using multi-line select somehow.
Yeah, just to make things pink, because pink's pretty. It's my favorite color. And then we're doing a little concatenation. And we're concatenating these 2 strings with this string. So I should get all the HTML, kind of like a template. Sweet. So when I run this, what? There we go.
That moment you yourself are having trouble with your file structure.
Form letter 001. And go run main. Go run main. What do I call it? 01. I need to go into O1. I don't know why I have O1. Oh, because I got 2 of them there. Go run main. First time takes second for the SDK to whatever come up to speed. Am I using the right word there, SDK? But what's that thing? What's that thing right here? What's this thing?
Yeah, I think it's the. Yeah, I think it's the runtime.
That right there. That's what got installed. Is it the runtime?
Yeah, I think
The SDK is to actually help me write the code, software development
I
kit.
think the SDK is more
Yeah,
like the
that's why
standard
it's
library.
App Engine SDK. It doesn't actually give you anything more for Go itself other than packages to help you work with App Engine.
Binary release.
That just means pre-built, so you don't have to build Go from source code.
I was just looking to see what they called it. Download binary distributions. It's just Go, man.
Yeah.
Programming
So
language.
yeah, it's just the Go. It's the Go tools, I guess.
Especially since it has everything with it, the compiler, the runtime environment, everything.
Yeah.
All right, so that's what this printed out. Looks like an HTML page. And you guys also have access to my other videos, HTML, where you could start learning about that. So a lot of this course, I gotta get through this stuff. I'm rambling. A lot of this course is self-direction. Okay? So even your grades, I was like, should I use Blackboard? And then I couldn't get into Blackboard. I don't know what happened with Fresno State. To hell with Blackboard. I thought, well, maybe I'll use this other learning management software. And nah, to hell with that. It's going to take too much time. I don't have a lot of time. I went to bed last night at 3, you know. So I'm going to create a spreadsheet online that you can all edit, like the first semester.
We're going back to that.
It's totally easy. I'll show you that in just a minute. All right. So let's get through this, though. So there it is, right? Rant. Awesome. So can I produce that to a text file? There's O2, and it puts it to a file. So before I show you the code, I go into O2 and just run it. Alan knows how far I've come, dude. When I started out here last semester, you guys were teaching me.
Oh, yeah.
And I got paid for it. How awesome is that? So it made this file. There's the file, and I could preview that. It's a web file. Sweet. So it's just a template. Well, how did the code work? It's the exact same code as before, but instead of producing the output to the command line terminal, right? We produced it to a file. How did we produce it to a file? Same thing, name. And then here I use func sprint instead of print. Sprint is string print. So print this stuff and store it as a string, right? String printing. And you can read about that in the func package. And so I get that into a variable string, and now I'm going to create a file. So I'm going to use from the OS package from the standard library a function called create. It takes a string, right, which is the name of the file. It returns 2 things. You can return 2 things in Go. Whoa, awesome. And this is how you do a lot of error handling in Go. It's not like try, catch, bullcrap, yuck, right, where it's somewhat removed and bloated. I hate that, right? You do have panic recover.
You don't even, in most languages, try catch, you don't even know whether there's an error that's possible or not. It's like with this, it's explicit. It's got an error, or it's going to be returning an error. You know that it allows errors if it's returning an error.
Yeah. I totally want to get together with you on errors. We got to do some talking on errors if you have any time this weekend. I'd love to, I don't know, I got to figure a few more things out there myself. So OS create and returns 2 things, and we check, is that error not nil? If it's nil, no problem. There's no error there, it's nil. If it's not nil, uh-oh, we had an error. So I could just log print line error creating the file and then print out whatever the error was. Otherwise, I get back in something which I called NF. Let's look at create. Create takes a name, gives me back a pointer to a file and an error, right? And then back in the standard library. Maybe I want to go over and look at that in, godoc.org and just see what it looks like there. So godoc.org OS will take me straight to it. Also, I just want to point out golang.org documentation, package documentation, find OS, all kinds of OS. Here I could also change it from package to source and see the files. Interesting. But here at godoc.org OS, I did the create, OS create, right? And it's under type file and does create, gives me a pointer to a file. When I have a pointer to a file, I then have all of these methods, right? And so this is a receiver right here. And in a function declaration, we have func, and then a receiver, and then identifier, and then arguments, and then returns, return or returns, right? And then code. So like take a picture of that with your screen, with your phone, or come back and watch this video later and do it. But that's like the function. And so those are the different places for things. Func, and it can have a receiver, and then an identifier, so the name of the function. And then, wow, I'm totally impressed. You guys are all taking photos. That's cool. And then arguments. Now take out your wallet and give me $20. And then arguments, and then your return or returns. You could have multiple returns. I spelled that wrong. Whatever. Now it's crazy. And then your code goes there. So here is a receiver, which means these are all attached to the file. So now when I have a file, I have all these methods available. I could use code completion inside WebStorm to kind of learn about that, NF, period. And it starts showing me like, oh, wow, you got a bunch of different options there. All right, so I could use code completion to sort of like see what options are available. And that helps me see, oh, now that I have a file, what can I do with it? If you really want to see some awesome, possum stuff, Daniel and I worked on this deal here, and some of it is just totally cool for Go things. But here it's lynda.com, so this is the repo that I use to teach Lynda stuff. And you come in here, and there's some really cool stuff like for files like image comparison or parsing weather data, which is like going out and getting data off the web and then dealing with it. Directory recursion's got some cool things in here where you could do like appending to a file. So I had like hundreds of files that I needed to append the copyright notice to. So there's like kind of like a scripting language. Hey, do this little service for me or whatever. Get this little piece of work done. Or here was renaming a bunch of files. There's a file renamer. These are the ones that peripherals right here. Daniel wrote that and 8 queens. I couldn't have figured those out. Those are hard. It's good stuff.
What do you do?
8 queens?
Well, peripherals gets input from the mouse and plays output sound from your speakers.
Turns your mouse into like a Star Trek. Ooh.
Pretty much.
And
8 queens finds all possible chessboards where you have 8 queens on them where none of them can actually reach each other.
I thought that was the one. It's a pretty famous programming problem. You can look it up. It's really, really interesting. And has several really interesting ways of solving it.
yeah, it's nuts. All right, so we're back to this. So we get a new file. And now one of the things I'm not doing here is when you open a file, you want to close it. So normally I'd want to close that file. But for brevity, I'm actually going to leave that in because that's like pretty bad coding not to do that.
Yeah,
So
if you leave your files open, no other program on your computer can actually access the file until it's done being closed. So make sure you close your files.
yeah. So that's closing the file. And then I'm just going to copy to the new file that string. But I have to make it a reader. Because if I look at what copy does, it takes a writer and a reader. These are interfaces. Interfaces allow for, what's up?
Where are you logging out the errors to? What do you exist about?
Oh, the logs a standard library package. It's in his imports up above, and it usually just goes. It defaults to the command line. I made one program once that made it dump it to a file though, but by default it goes to the command line. And actually, I think you're supposed to usually use error instead of print log.error or something. I forget what the exact. Fatal. That's it.
That one?
Yeah, you're supposed to use log.fatal line because that will also exit your Go program at the same time instead of moving on to the other code.
It's basically pretty much the same as if like you just put in the string
So yeah, that right there, log.fatal there is the same as doing thumped print line and then calling exit and shutting down the Go program.
Do you have some kind of stack trace and then we can take a look at where you went?
I think the log package does a bunch of other stuff because it needs to be able to redirect to a file if you set that up. So it gets a bit complicated if you do a stack trace. But basically that's the same as printing it out to the current location, log location, and then exiting.
To be fair to Go, I don't think I've ever seen a stack trace be nice.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially since in Go is very multi-processing heavy, and when it prints out the stack trace, it prints out the stack trace for every thread you've got running, which can be hundreds.
So we were just talking about
Readers and writers.
readers and writers, and those are interfaces. Who's heard of interfaces before? Cool. So that's like a subject in and of itself. I don't think we have enough time for it. I mean, there's no class in here after us. At least there wasn't on Wednesday, right?
Correct.
And then we have till 2, right? That's like our lab time after this.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we'll see. We'll see what happens today. Hopefully we keep talking. But anyhow, that copies it. And if we have more time, we'll talk about interfaces. And so it creates that file, and then I could show it. So that's kind of like, cool, man. We're moving somewhere with templates, right? We were able to take some data, inject it into a string. Well, there's actually something that we could use in the standard library called text template. So we could create a template. So we could pull our text out of where our code is and put it into a template. And so here's a template. It doesn't take any data, so I don't have any data fields, meaning put data in here. So it's just it's just text. And I'm going to take that text, and for a template, I need to parse it. All right, so this is just going to parse the template. So go get that file and parse it, and and what does it return it as? It gives it back as a pointer to a template and an error. Right? So I got a template and an error. I check my error, and then I execute my template. And when I execute my template, execute needs to give it. You have to give it a writer and data. Right? So if I was passing data in, there would be the data that I pass in. And the writer is just, we'll talk about interfaces, but it's basically like, standard out is a writer. I could write to standard out. Standard out implements the writer interface is how you would say it. And so I execute my template. It's going to write it standard out. And if there's, an error, we deal with it. So let's take a look at that. So got all that text in that other file, wrote it standard out. So the steps with templates: parse your template, execute your template. And then here we could also do it to a file. So same thing, right, as we did before. That first time went to standard out. This time we're going to do it to a file. So parse our template, create a file, execute our template. Instead of standard out, write it to that file. Because the file and standard out both implement the writer interface. So writer interfaces allow for polymorphism, right? Polymorphism meaning poly, many, morph, changing. And so depending upon which writer I put in here, it's changing the way my code works, my program works. So execute is polymorphic. Am I saying that right? Right? Because it can take in different things, anything that implements the writer interface. So if I run that, all right, should have created a file for me. There's the file, and cool, same deal. That's an HTML file, extension HTML. Pow.
Right. You can close it there either.
Huh?
You can close the file there either.
Oh!
When your program ends, it auto-closes all files. The operating system will close your files for you if you don't if you still have any open when your program ends. So don't worry about it too much for a short-running program. It is bigger an issue when you're running a web server, which is supposed to be on indefinitely.
Yeah.
You definitely want to close those files.
So defer just says when main exits, anything that's been deferred, or whatever function that defer is in, when that function exits, anything that's been deferred then runs, and then the function's done. So last thing, the whatever block scope it's in. So here we're in the block scope of
Well, it's
the main
it's
function.
the function scope doesn't care about.
Yeah, the
if
function
statements.
scope, right?
So when that function ends, it executes that line.
That
It doesn't
defer.
matter how it ends. It could end due to the error, or it could end due just running out of lines of code. Either way, that line executes at the end. So that way he doesn't have to close it in 2 different places. He can just say defer, hey, I'm going to need this closed when we're done here. One of the more useful Go features.
It's cool. What's your favorite programming language, Daniel?
Right now, Go.
Awesome. So here, same thing, template parse it, template execute. This time I'm passing in 42. Why 42?
It means that you have something in your template that can accept it.
Why?
Or-
Yeah, it's the meanings of life. So if you're going to be in the geek world, that's a number that you should just standardly use. It signals to people, hey, I know about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's the answer to the meaning of life. In Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they created a program to run on a computer. What is the answer to the meaning of life? It ran for like centuries, then finally it's like 42. All right. So what's my template going to look like? Right here. Put the data right there between the curly braces. Why curly braces? That seems to be what is used for templating. So there's mustache IO and mustache IO.
I didn't know this was a thing.
You know, they look like mustaches, right? So here's mustache, right? For templates. What's another template? Isn't there
There were a few. I don't really
template
use too
like
many HTML.
mustache? There's another one. I can't remember what it is. It's just not at the top of my handlebars. That's it, right? So that's another one where your data that you want merged into your template is between the curly braces. So in Go, we're using curly braces too in our templates. And why the dot? Any? Okay. Where else have you all seen dots in programming? Yeah, so like, you know, dot notation, this class, you know, or this object and this thing, or whatever, property, object.property. And you know, here in the terminal, I think about it, right? Like if I do an ls-la, there's a dot, dot. What's the dot?
Directory.
Yeah, it's my current directory, right? So the dot is kind of like the current directory. The people who made Go have heavy Unix backgrounds, right? And so they use the dot to be like the current piece of data, and they use this concept of pipelines. And you can read about pipelines right here. So I just put the link in. And a pipeline is a place with a really great wave. A pipeline is a set of data processing elements connected in series where the output of one element is the input of the next one. The output of one element is the input of the next one. How many people have done pipelining stuff at the terminal or command line? Okay.
It's a
I haven't done much of
ridiculously
it.
useful thing to do when you're having problems.
Yeah. So, yeah, won't go off on a tangent. So that's we're passing this in, and that's the current piece of data. So when we run it, we're in 003. There we go. We've now merged data into our template. Man, we're making good headway. Now, something that you should know. I don't know where that thought went. It's like, oh, I got to tell them that. I don't know where it went. Merge it in, data, template, pipeline. All right, maybe it'll come back. Must not have been important. Now I'm going to do a whole bunch of data. All right, so instead here, just passing in a number, I'm doing slice, literal. And so it's a slice with the literal values all in one place. And it's a slice of strings. So slice is a data structure in Go, much like a list in Python, right? And it's built on top of an array, so it's can change in size. You could add things to it, but watch that course online to learn about slices.
Basically the same as the C++ vector, if you've used that.
I'm passing in a bunch of names. So what's my template going to look like? I'm going to range over that data structure that came in, which will do a loop. And then each time through the loop, the output of this will be the input of that. So even though we got dot dot, remember that this is the slice, and then this is the item for each loop in the iteration. So the output of this, the item in each loop, becomes the input of this dot. So pipeline. And so this will create a unordered list, a bulleted list of my peeps. I think that's 004. It's got to be. Or just that. We're building web pages. Now all we got to do is serve them and get 1.1 billion daily users. The rest is easy. I chose 1.1 billion because that's how many monthly users, unique users, Google has. 1/7 of the population of the world each month goes to Google. And they have the jets, the private corporate planes, to prove it. So here I'm passing in nothing, just an empty, right? Slice. And I'm doing an else. Range, if there is data, print it. Else, no items. So 05. No items. And you could read about pipelining at godoc.org text template. And so you can read about all that stuff, right? But ranging, range, pipeline, else, right? And don't be surprised if when you read documentation or the spec, it does have that sort of Japanese haiku cone effect on you, right? I know somebody whose name I'm not going to mention, but they wrote one of the best books in the Go programming language. And they said, dude, it took me like 6 months to understand the language spec. So this is somebody who's been like a professional developer for like decades, wrote one of the best books on the language, and confided in me, like, I didn't understand the spec for 6 months. It took me that long when I came to the language just to be like, okay, I get it, I get it.
Personally, I've been in Todd's class for a year working with this language, and I use the documentation. If I forgot a function, I go look for an example if I actually forgot how to use it.
Yeah. And Go by example is a nice place to quickly sort of see how do I use that, and then, I don't know, I'll give you those resources later. All right. So that's 05. How many people just like had enough? Your brain's told your buffer's full.
I just have a question actually. Are any of these websites that you're listing right here and directories to your like GitHub and stuff, can we have this on like I know you said you weren't using Blackboard, but is there any other way that you can maybe put them?
Yeah, I'll show you that.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and don't ever assume that I have thought of everything.
You kind of mentioned last time that you were going to get some syllabus.
Yeah, I'll show you that too. I figured code first, because that's the important stuff. And first things first, right? Like, who cares about all that other stuff? You guys are here for code to learn. That's first. so you could then go out and do stuff. So now I'm going to pass in P1. What is P1? Cool thing in WebStorm is you could use multiple selections. So I've selected all P1s on the page, so it's easy to see P1. P1 is, let me figure out the right way to say this. You say it first. Let me hear how you'd say it. Come over close to the microphone so that people watch online. Here, see how Daniel explains it.
So P1 is of type person,
Nice.
which person's defined up above, actually, right there, lines 9 through 12. So the type keyword is defining a new type. So type keyword goes keyword type, then an identifier, so calling it person, and then what the base or subtype is of this type. So in this, so you can have your type. You can create a type X int if you want, and now every time you say X, you're referring to an int underneath. So usually that's not as helpful. I mean, it can occasionally be, but not always. So like right there, whenever you say hound dog, it's actually an int. It works just like an int, but you can. It's of type hound dog, which you are allowed to attach methods to if you want. So struct is a type built in that lets you put multiple pieces of data in together. But usually it's a big pain typing out that big struct thing every time you want to refer to that type. So usually you will use the type keyword to give it another name. So like he's calling it person here. And so now you can just say person, and it refers to struct name string age int.
Cool. I like the way you said that. P1 is of type person. Type person is a custom type. And when you say type person is of type struct, the underlying type of person is struct.
Yeah, that's it.
Underlying type of person is struct. And it has some fields. And these fields have some capitalization, which means those are going to be visible. So if those are lowercase, I'll play with that in a second, we might not be able to see them in our template, right? They might only be available within this package. And but interestingly, that doesn't need to be capitalized. It's just something to play with. When what the heck? Why is it not working? Change the capitalization. See if we can then access that. So it's got some fields and types, and then we create. I almost want to say an instance, right? But we create a variable of type person, and it's a struct. I always stumble a little bit talking about those.
Yeah,
Name and
the
age.
Go people are almost rebellious against standard C-side terminology, so they do not like the word instance.
Yeah, because it really is. They're trying to approach programming from a new perspective and take best practices from other places, and get outside the box, which is really what technology is about. It's about innovation. How can we do things differently? I talked a little bit about this on Wednesday, right? Didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah, and how do we do things differently? And so it's funny that people who are in the business of innovating and doing things differently rebel so strongly when new things are brought. Oh, that's not the way we've always done it. That's not the field you're in. You're in the field of doing it the way you haven't always done it. Really, right? Let's create something new. Do something the way we haven't always done it. So, but anyhow, so they, some of the words from, they've been in computer science for a long time. Instance, object, public, private. We're going to kind of come at things a little bit different angle, and that brings a lot of baggage. We haven't seen this run, so I'm passing in this whole variable P1 of type person, which will have name and age. So my template looks like this: name, age. Cool. Up arrow, Todd. James Bond 42. Sweet.
Could I make a little note that might be useful later on?
Yeah.
It's good to note at this point in time that the templates that we see output, these proper HTML files that we see output, you never would have known, had you not been involved in actually putting data into these, that data was actually injected into these. It's just there from that point of view. So when you are making websites, consider that when you're designing them, it helps a lot.
Yeah, so the user doesn't know that this is dynamically built.
Yeah, they go to your web page. I mean, that the Twitter thing earlier today, we were just looking at that. It's using this template stuff. You don't know that. You just see it's got a login button. When you log in, it changes to a log out button. You don't know that it's using templates underneath to generate that automatically. You just see a login button.
It's also known as composition in Go, kind of using these instead of object-oriented or whatever. And there's a Bill Kennedy composition. He has a nice blog post on it, goinggo.net, composition with Go, and you could read about that. I also cover it in the training online. All right, so here's the last one we're going to look at. And here we're passing in type person, and then we're embedding type person in type 00. So everything in person is promoted to 00. And if you get conflicts, right? So let's say 00 also had, so everything we're putting everything that's in person inside 00. But what if 00 also had name, right? And why is it not liking that? Oh, there it goes. Right? Then when I make p 00, then this name would win, right? What do they call that? Overriding, overloading. And so it's kind of like overloading. And but then I could still access the previous one if I wanted. Anyhow, that's composition. You could read about that. Type person struct, embedding that type here, type 00, making a variable p1 of type 00, right? And then it's going to have person, and person is this, and then it has license to kill false. So we took away, well, this is Ian Fleming, not James Bond. So Ian Fleming did not have a license to kill as far as I know. You guys know Ian Fleming? The guy who wrote the James Bond books. All right, and then what's our template look like? Name, age, license to kill. There's an if statement there, right? Else, license to ill. Change directories. And license to ill, because it was false. So that's a little bit of an introduction to Go. Let me just show you resources and syllabus. So syllabus first. And I'll share this. So everybody just write this down. That's a pretty good one. So we'll copy that and get here.
I have to admit, it's surprisingly better than you usually get.
This is what I want. Sweet, some of you are quick. So did you give the way? So that's how you get here.
It's fudgy die.
Fudgy die. It's cool. And so then this will be the grade book. So you guys will be responsible for taking care of your grade. And you will be assessed by others, observed by others, and that's going to occur in two ways. So you'll do your work, and you'll come in here, and you will say, I was here today, right? And you'll put an X. Of course, when you first get in here, you could all edit this document. You'll enter your name. You'll enter your student ID. You'll enter your email, or whatever it is. And you will not enter your grade in the course. I will calculate that. Done. But you will enter, okay, you know, I was here Wednesday, somewhat. I was half here. But you'll just put a little X, and I was here today. And so on the syllabus it says 17% of your grade is for being in class. Because that's like a large part of life is just showing up. So I've played with this before, not show up. But I want to have you guys around. Because I didn't get enough attention when I was a kid, so I went into teaching. I think it will help you learn. And so you basically get 1 percentage point a week, or 0.5% each day you show up. And then the other 83% of the class will be assignments. There's no final. There's no test. All right. So that's a grade. So you'll enter your stuff here, then this will get calculated automatically. And, you know, you could go down the list if you think you might have a conflict with somebody as everybody's entering stuff just to get your name in the first time, and then I'll just sort it and they'll come to the top. But enter your own attendance, and then also I'll have assignments over here. So your first assignment, create a template that uses conditional logic. And create a program that shows the type of, I don't know, some variable. Use font print f. Okay? And I think I want that to wrap, so I'm going to right-click all this and format, merge, align, text wrapping, overflow wrap. There we go. Create a template that uses conditional logic. Create a program that shows the type of some variable. Use font print f. What would be other good assignments?
How do we like show you like once it's done, or like what do we do?
Great question. How do you show me when it's done? What's the first one? Is templates. Conditional logic. My screen's too short. Hyperlink. Paste in the hyperlink. And then I could come in here and, oh, you got 100%, let me look at your code. So I'll be spot checking, make sure you're giving yourself good grades. Or if Daniel needs some extra money, he'll be spot checking. But I'm not going to be so much like, you did this wrong, let me show you how to do it right. Quite frankly, I don't have the time. It's your responsibility to take ownership of your education and to learn it because you want to learn it. And if you don't learn it, you'll never have this skill, you'll never use it, that's cool. You could get through in a cursory way. But I truly believe that what you'll learn in this class is incredibly powerful and useful. And this is stuff that you will fall back upon as you get out into the workforce. It's highly demanded. If you look at the metrics for web programming, web development, people who know how to do it, no matter where you end up, that's a knowledge base you're going to need, right? If you stay with programming, you'll be able to make valuable contributions to whatever organization you get involved with by having good knowledge in this area. You'll be able to advise them and inform them. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of bad choices you can make, right? I feel like we are going to teach you the absolute best thing you can know. HTML, CSS, a sprinkling of JavaScript. We're not going to focus on that in here, and a whole lot of Go. And this will serve you really well, So. So I'll spot check it, but I'm not going to be like, hey, you didn't write that right. If you aren't getting it right, or if you want me to look at it, you need to come up and say, hey, could you check this and make sure this is right? Or I'm struggling on this, I don't get it. And then there's a bunch of people here who want to help you, right? Not only because it's awesome to help each other and work together, and there's a huge, statistically studied positive effect that everyone gets from helping each other. So there's a study they did, and the name of the study was, if you think money can't buy you happiness, you don't know where to shop. And they gave people money. And they said to one group of people, go spend this on yourself. And then they said to the other group of people, go spend this on somebody else. And they have ways of measuring this stuff. And the people who spent the money on themselves, their happiness didn't change. But the people who spent the money on somebody else, their happiness went up. So we're pro-social creatures. Pro-social, meaning we are pack animals. And we operate in a social environment. And so when you align with your nature, it feels good, right? That's the way you were made. You're doing what you're made to do. And so that's why sex feels good. You're aligning with your nature. Nature wants you to reproduce, so it makes it feel good, right? If it didn't feel good, you'd be like, no thank you, right? But when you align with your nature, it feels good. When you are doing pro-social things, like helping each other, you get a nice feeling. So we want to help you because it's good for us, because it makes us feel good. The Dalai Lama says, you know what? I've done everything I've done because not for anybody else, but for me. It makes me feel good. And then the other reason we want to help you is we want to keep our saw sharp, and troubleshooting things with you. Really, kind of like that's the way you learn. Is you get into problems and you fight your way out, and then you're like, okay, cool. Now I know how to solve that issue.
To that end, I agree with everything Todd's saying. Take it from someone who did this for 6 years and walked away with a bachelor's. Helping others will help yourself. But to that end, if you don't feel you're up to that, I have been known to help those that approach me. I'm in the library all the time. Although, since I am interviewing with Google, I reserve the right to say I'm busy.
Yeah, and if you feel like you need extra help, you know, like I'm sure you could work something out with Aaron or Shin or Alan or Daniel. You know, hey, do you have some free time? I could pay you $15 an hour. Get together and tutor for a little bit. You know, like, you know, it's like, yeah, I'll help you for 15, 30 minutes, you know. But if you need like somebody for an hour or two, then you might want to say, can I buy you dinner? Or do something nice. All right, so you'll enter your own grades, and we'll occasionally look at them. And then the other place that you will be assessed is just when you get out in the workforce. That's the ultimate assessment. You know, do you know your stuff? Can you do things? And so that's the ultimate test. Yeah.
So, are we going to come into the same repo, or is it open repo?
No, you create your own repo
Yeah,
and put your code at your own repo, and then show me the link. And then this repo will just be the one for the code in the class as we're going through lecture, so you can come in there and reference it.
So do we want to go over a little bit about GitHub? Because not everyone was 100% on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to stop this video, I guess, and then we'll start over. And